my fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The video, shot by an infantryman, was from inside a Bradley fighting vehicle in Kuwait, just across the border from Iraq, moments after President George W. Bush ordered an invasion.
How do you feel about the situation at hand?
I'm ready to go. Let's go.
I volunteered to deploy with our Hawaii Army National Guard unit because the events of 9/11, like so many Americans, changed my life, changed my perspective, and I had enlisted in the military, motivated by what happened there, to go after the Islamist terrorists who attacked us on that day. Our unit, or the National Guard unit, was activated for a deployment to Iraq. I was told by my commander, congratulations, you don't have to go. Your name is, we've already got someone filling this job in the medical unit where I was serving. So you can stay home and you can continue doing what you're doing. But I knew that there was no way, just no way that I could stay back and work in some plush office in the state capitol and watch my brothers and sisters in uniform go and deploy to war. Being exposed literally on the front lines to the war profiteering and the military-industrial complex, the monopoly of KBR Halliburton making an immeasurable amount of money off of this war. Again, I was there for all of 2005 in Iraq, and that was in the early days. And you look at what has happened since over the ensuing decades in Iraq and Afghanistan, being there, experiencing it, and at a basic level, understanding government spending and taxpayer dollars and how are we using it, the accountability, and going and talking to these, they labeled them third country nationals. They would import in from places like Nepal and the Philippines and Sri Lanka, pay them pennies, essentially, compared to how much they were charging the federal government to do things like, okay, well, we're gonna cook food for the troops every day. And, I started asking, well, how if I walk into the Chow Hall tent or building or whatever and get a bowl of cereal and a banana for breakfast, how much is KBR Halliburton charging the US federal government for that? And it was some outrageous price. In 2005, it was like $40. Per service member, per meal. They served 4 meals a day. And then we made friends with these people from the Philippines and Nepal and Sri Lanka who were working there. After I was like, how much are you getting paid? Oh, $500 a month. Who walked away with the most profits in the war in Afghanistan alone? Major defense contractors. What does the Department of Defense have to say about the money that was spent there? They can't even account for the vast majority of money that was spent there. What can we say?
Yeah, we're talking billions of dollars, billions or hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yes, hundreds of billions of dollars.
It's trillions, if I remember correctly.
Overall, what was spent? Yes, trillions of dollars were spent on that war.
And trillions of dollars unaccounted for.
Exactly.
Spent and unaccounted for. Right, so that's pretty damn convenient for whoever those trillions of dollars went to.
For the military-industrial complex. And then you have these defense contractors, again, saying publicly, war is good for business.
With that era of the Cheney, Bush, Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, it felt like, oh, these are the Death Star bods. What's happening is there's this risen up military-industrial complex, Rand Foundation ideologues from the Republican right, who were the sanctioned baddies back in those days, are trying to profit from the colonization of the Middle East. It's part of a new American project. We sort of understood it, but from where I'm coming from, it was somehow recognizable, and 1 million people went on a march to prevent that war taking place because they knew there were no weapons of mass destruction, which we now know to be the truth.
I chose to be a Democrat. My family it wasn't one of those like legacy party affiliation things that you just did. For us here in Hawaii, the origins of the Democratic Party really came from a party that fought for people. It was a Democratic Party that fought for those who didn't have a voice. It was a Democratic Party that celebrated civil liberties, that celebrated freedom and individual thought, this big tent party that really was rooted in kind of those traditional liberal JFK-esque ideals. And it was a party that had many voices that spoke out for peace. One of the main reasons why I chose to leave the Democratic Party is because the Democratic Party has become the war party. Those voices that we talked about a little bit on the left who challenged the military-industrial complex, challenged this pro-war narrative that we're seeing across the board, I don't see them anymore. And worse yet, we have leaders in the Democratic Party who are the ones who are actually amping up these counterproductive wars, who are amping up these new Cold Wars against Russia and China, who are amping up and escalating and pushing us to the brink of nuclear war.
Congresswoman, none of this matters unless there's a nuclear war, which you voted to send arms and weapons to Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard, she's left the Democratic Party because they're a bunch of war hawks. Okay? You originally voted, you ran as an outsider, yet you've been voting to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a thermonuclear war with Russia and China. Why are you playing with the lives of American citizens? You're playing with our lives.
There will be no neighbors if there's a nuclear bomb. You voted to mobilize and send money to Ukrainian Nazis. You're a coward. You're a progressive socialist. Where are you against the war mobilization? He's telling the right truth. You have done nothing. Tulsi Gabbard has shown guts where you've shown cowardice. I believed in you, and you became the very thing you sought to fight against.
This question of how my experiences there on these deployments, the experiences that I've had throughout this time, was one of the main reasons why I left the Democratic Party, and frankly was one of the main reasons that back in 2016 that I saw the necessity to leave as vice chair of the DNC to go and speak out against Hillary Clinton's warmongering record as she was trying to become our country's commander-in-chief, and the dangers of what would happen if that became a reality.
Overnight, in the capital of Ukraine, the sound of missile strikes and air sirens. Explosions rocking several cities, including the capital of Kyiv, targeting military installations, including air bases housing fighter jets.
So what, do you have any sense, and have you talked to anybody who, as far as you're concerned, has some reasonable vision about what actually might be done in a sensible manner on the Russia-Ukraine front?
Well, the reasonable people who are rooted in reality and not fantasy understand that the only way to bring about an end to this war is through diplomatic means, where no one is going to walk away happy, but there is a reasonable approach to being able to find that agreement. You'll hear from the Biden administration anytime this is brought up, well, Zelensky and Ukraine have to be the ones to drive this. They're the ones who have to set the terms and everything else. The only way that they're able to continue doing what they're doing is through the means that the United States, largely the United States, but also some other countries in Europe, are providing them with the weapons and the money and the ability to do so. So the United States has, President Biden,
we could
has
definitely
a
stop
responsibility.
lying about the fact that this is Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly.
Like nobody with any sense at all believes that. I mean, we're in a proxy war for sure, and we have been from the beginning. And so we might as well be crystal clear about that, because what I know something about World War I and World War II, and the other wars we've been in since, is that what tends to happen is you get pulled in one stupid step at a time, especially if you're also turning a blind eye to the chicanery of your wealthy friends who are profiting like mad on the war front.
As we're talking about a diplomatic end to this war, something that should have happened a very long time ago, something the Biden administration has been blocking, categorically blocking even efforts between Russian and Ukrainian officials on their own who are trying to come together. It's been the United States that has been blocking them, telling Ukraine, no, leave the table, don't negotiate.
How have they been blocking? What are the details
There
of
are
that?
multiple reports publicly of Biden administration officials telling Ukraine not to negotiate, as well as other countries who have been also sharing that they've been getting that same message, going all the way back to, I think, March, shortly after this war kicked off, when there were...
I heard the same thing. I heard that from people I was talking to who knew what they were talking about in Israel, too, that the Russians, there were avenues open quite early in the conflict where diplomatic maneuvering could have hypothetically proved useful, and that was blocked. Now, I'm not saying it would have been useful, but I couldn't understand when this all broke out why the number one priority of Western leaders, who instead gathered to, make fun of Putin's hypermasculinity, and it was a pretty sad bunch of wimps gathered around the G7 table who were managing that, I might say, instead of noting that if they had any sense at all, they'd be trying to broker something like an intelligent arrangement.
You see Pete Buttigieg and fucking Kamala Harris and Biden can't get a sentence out. You're like, this is madness. These people are utter fools. And these are the people that are running everything. And these are the people that are getting us on the brink of war with Russia. And I don't have any faith in them. And I think most people don't.
One of the reasons I have a certain sympathy for people like Bernie Sanders, and more recently for people like both Russell Brand and Joe Rogan, is because there's a necessary voice on the left that targets something like corporate governance, government, media collusion at the highest levels, right? The construction of these gigantic, tentacled, multilateral organizations that engage in regulatory capture and then turn into, let's say, what Eisenhower warned everybody about in relationship to the military-industrial complex. And there's a necessary voice on the left that I don't think precisely should be striving against capitalism per se. I think that's the big mistake, but should be striving against fascist corporate government collusion.
Now, the figures that are in that place are sort of posing as the good guys, like affable and avuncular presidents and sort of friendly people of, that are across the identitarian spectrum that's meant to feel inclusive and progressive.
Yeah, they're wrapping themselves up with progressive identity politics and then promoting a war.
I don't think that they are creating an agenda to advance the interests of vulnerable people. I think they are using it as a distraction and a veil in order to carry on with the same kind of corporate and financial interests that have always determined what the establishment is. And if there's one thing we can point to in our lifetime, it's that the liberal establishment has become co-opted by the same forces that traditionally we regarded the right to have been co-opted by: military-industrial complex, financial industry. And there's palpable evidence for that. And in order to not acknowledge that transition's taken place, they're able to keep the cultural conversation going. We care about your right to express yourself and your identity. That's a way of not acknowledging we're just the same. We're pro-war. But something extraordinary has happened when people that say that they're, we're the peace and love party are the party that are advocating for war, won't include some of the complex conditions that have led to this current crisis, which there's clearly a case for, NATO's infringement on Russian territory, the 2014 coup. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's extraordinary that those conversations don't happen.